I met Catherine in 2010 at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C. I was introduced to her by Anita Moncrief, who was another friend of mine who had been a left-wing Acorn insider, and she realized that Acorn was engaged in vote fraud in an attempt to steal the election for President Obama. They were successful, but it changed Anita, and she came over to our side and began working with Breitbart, and then with Catherine, and I met Catherine. And that year, Catherine at the CPAC convention, much to everybody's surprise, but really she deserved it, Catherine won the Reagan Award that night. On Friday night, they have the Reagan Award dinner, and we were sitting there, and she got that award, and it was really quite a moving moment. But I just want to give you an idea. She personifies what is great about our nation, and it's what terrifies the left. We have people who just come out of the woodwork because they suddenly feel they need to do something. They have no experience in politics, they have no experience in activism, and they just come forward and start doing stuff. And she very quickly created this group called True the Vote, which is website is truethevote.org. And the work that they have done is amazing. A lot of the voter records, as we all know, are highly corrupt. There's dead people on the rolls. There's people that have moved on the rolls. And this is true of Ohio. And I know that Catherine, along with partnering with Judicial Watch, sued the Secretary of State of Ohio in 2012. And they won in court and forced the Ohio Secretary of State to clean the rolls. And I know because I talked with some of the voter registrars in Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, which is where the biggest problems are, and they cleaned about 30% of the voters off the rolls. So in that year anyway, the elections in Ohio were cleaner, although it didn't ultimately help us defeat President Obama, unfortunately. But Catherine has done amazing things. When Governor Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, was facing recall in 2010, he had become governor, and they had taken the state house, and they were really doing some amazing reforms, especially union reform against the teacher unions, which was the greatest thing in the world. Teacher unions came out and occupied the state house, and it was a real disgrace. But anyway, and then they had a recall for him, where 1.5 million people registered to recall Scott Walker. And there was not going to be any vetting of those registrations. And Catherine came along and created an online tool and called for volunteers who could work that online tool from their home, from their computer. And she got 14,000 volunteers around the country. And I think ultimately it went up to 17,000. She'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. But they analyzed 1.5, almost, let's see, I've got it here in front of me. I'm trying to read it. Almost in 22 days, they analyzed 3 times, 91% of that 1.5 million registrations in 22 days. And they found that only about a third of them were actually eligible with eligible signatures. And they turned that information over to the Wisconsin Government Accountability Board, which is Wisconsin's version of the Board of Elections. And the corrupt Democrats in that organization rejected all of her efforts and allowed all of those many fraudulent, duplicate, Mickey Mouse registrations to go forward. It was a disgrace, but it does not detract from this Herculean effort that she put together with a couple of Tea Party groups in Wisconsin and their effort. And ultimately, the recall vote failed anyway, and Scott Walker went on to do some really good things in the state. Of course, now it's fallen back to the Democrats once again through vote fraud. And so I'm going to let Catherine take over, and she's going to tell you about the threat that we face from vote fraud in the upcoming election, because the COVID issue has really ramped up that threat, because many states are going to be doing all their ballots in the mail, and that is the easiest way that they will commit vote fraud. And I guarantee you they will commit vote fraud. They've put all kinds of efforts into turning that into their way of doing our way, and throughout the United States, of doing elections everywhere from now into the future. And that should tell you something. These corrupt Democrats all need to go. We need to throw them out of Congress, and we need to start prosecuting them for the criminal activity that they've been engaged in, the criminal subversion of our nation they've been engaged in for many years. So I'm so honored to have Catherine here. She's just such a great person. I wish I'd go on for another 20 minutes telling you all the stuff she's had to go through, but I'll let her go forward with that herself. And so without any further comment, Catherine, thanks so much for coming. Great to have you.
Oh gosh, Jim, thanks so much for asking me to be a part of this. And you know, you've been such a great friend for such a long time. I'm thrilled to see you running, and we'll do everything I can to support you in that, because there could be no finer representative. I want to share a few slides, if I can just go straight to that. I want to talk tonight about what's happening with the changes, that the rapid fire changes to our election process that are coming at the hand of this, what I call the fog of COVID. The Democrats, the radicalized left, are using this crisis very, very effectively to upend elections in ways that some you've heard of, some have been talked about on the news, and I suspect that many of you haven't. And so my hope tonight is to sort of frame for you what's happening, and I'd like to, and then talk about what we can do about it, but I'd like to start by taking a half a step back and assure you that this effort, the left plays the long game, right? They play inch by inch by inch. They keep moving the window a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, cycle after cycle. And we have now arrived at the point that I would characterize as an end game. We are seeing lawsuits spring up all over the country. There are now 60 individual lawsuits by the Democrat Party, by special interest groups, but that number grows every single day. We're also seeing administrative fiat. Another term for that would be the use of police powers by these rogue bureaucrats that are with a one swoop of the pen dictating that all the states should be mail-in, dictating that voter ID has been struck down, dictating that vote harvesting is now legal in their state, dictating that signature verifications don't matter. These are the things that are happening sort of, out of the mainstream line of discussion, under this notion that it's so convenient during this health crisis, it's so convenient to use mail-in ballots. I saw a poll last week that indicated that 2 out of 3 Americans favor mail-in ballots. So this is a very scary map that shows what's already happened. This is what you see in the states. These are just the changes made to the state election processes. There are at least 20 states that have already been subjected to some form of bureaucratic fiat, some sort of executive order that has fundamentally changed election processes in the states. Of course, this is all under the guise of COVID. Tag teaming onto those fiats are these individual lawsuits that are being commandeered by Mark Elias, who was former attorney for Hillary Clinton, masterminded the sue and settle strategy that played out in 2016, and now they are playing for all it's worth, suing as fast as they possibly can in as many states as they possibly can, to so overwhelm the process, so overwhelm the system that you can't move fast enough to keep up. True the Vote has already, we got involved in a case that was careening towards the New Mexico Supreme Court, where that state would have gone all mail-in. We were successful there in stopping it at the New Mexico Supreme Court. Now we have sued the Secretary of State in Nevada, who is shockingly a Republican, and the governor of Virginia. We've sued the Secretary of State of Nevada for her fiat, making all the state mail-in, also the allowance for vote harvesting, the removal of signature verifications. And then in Virginia, we've sued, interestingly, the governor there did 2 interesting things. The first is he struck down voter ID. But of greater note, he has declared everyone in the state of Virginia to be disabled as a result of COVID. And therefore, they're using that as the end around to legitimize the need for full mail-in all across the state. Now, Bev said this earlier, you know, our voter rolls are a mess. The reason our voter rolls are a mess is because the same groups that are now suing these states to push mail-in ballots are the same groups that prior to COVID have fought tooth and nail to prevent the states from cleaning their voter rolls, tooth and nail to prevent voter ID. So it's worked in perfect concert to allow the rolls to get so gummed up with duplicates and deceased and non-citizens and flat out fraudulent. You know, the number was used in Cuyahoga County when we sued and along with Judicial Watch to have the Secretary of State in Ohio clean the rolls, and 30% of the roll came off in Cuyahoga County. That's, you know, frankly, it's a little higher than what we've found in our research broadly, but our number is at about 23%. That is a shocking number of invalid registrations. And this new mail-in push is pushing to send ballots to everyone, whether they are on the active voter list or the inactive voter list. They want to send to everybody on that list, which includes even those people that they suspect have not voted in 6 years and should have been removed, or they suspect that there's a problem and have set aside that registration as an inactive registration. All of them are going to get mail-in ballots for 2020. So this is very, very engineered. This litigation is staged. It is very intentional. This commandeering of police powers by, you know, executives within the state, it's outrageous. These are and the fundamental problem and sort of the line that we're taking in our lawsuits is that this creates a condition of voter dilution, and we're very fortunate that our attorney is Jim Bopp, who was the architect of the argument for Bush v. Gore that was also voter dilution. So, you know, he knows what it looks like. And so when we first got our first call, we had some True the Vote volunteers in New Mexico, as I mentioned, who were just flipped out that this petition was moving through their state so quickly to go all mail-in. So I called Jim, and he could quickly put together the argument because it had so many familiar earmarkings from the Bush v. Gore process that the whole country went through. Well, it's happening so fast and in so many places now that no matter really how aggressive we are in attempting to stop it, and we're going to still fight in as many states as we possibly can. We've learned the hard way that when you have a Democrat party suing a friendly Democrat election officials in a friendly Democrat court, that in certain instances where we've tried to intervene just in the last month, the intervention was denied because even before the intervention could be considered, the friendly parties signed off on a sue and settle consent decree and got it out of court before we could even fight it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, but no matter how you slice it, we're going to see an inordinate number of mail-in ballots being pushed through to counties and municipalities who are simply not ready to handle it. So, well, and then before I move on, let me talk about ballot harvesting, which is sort of this new notion that community organizers think navigators from Obamacare, think Acorn and voter registration. Well, now we are here with ballot harvesters. These ballot harvesters or vote harvesters are allowed to pick up ballots and distribute ballots and turn in ballots. And in certain states, this is being done now writ large without any limitation. Groups are competing with competing bids. They're being funded to do this. And this creates so much chaos on so many levels that it doesn't, you know, it's apparent. But I'll point this out. What's not maybe so apparent is that vote harvesters really threaten the most vulnerable of our citizens in elderly communities. They're sitting ducks for these people who are going to come in. And we've actually just prosecuted or in the process of prosecuting a case in Texas where vote harvesters were coming to nursing homes. It's a very real situation. So where does this all land? It's, you know, we talked already tonight, and Bev talked about Saul Alinsky. Well, what Saul Alinsky's contemporaries were two people which I'm sure you're all familiar with, Francis Fox Piven and Richard Cloward. Well, those two college professors back in the day, back in Rules for Radicals and the development of these strategies, they wrote a thesis called The Weight of the Poor. And the whole basis of their argument was the way that you implode the government and get it to a place where you, as a radical, can have maximum impact is you implode it from the inside out. You bear down with so much chaos that the system has no other option but to crack. And then, amidst the ruin, those who are best organized can make, write their own ticket. And that's what they're counting on doing. They are counting on pushing this. I mean, will there be fraud with the mail-in ballots generally? Yeah, absolutely. But even more significant than that, they are counting on this procedural chaos. I mean, the volunteers that I'm speaking with, or the county workers that I've spoken with nationally that are anticipating this tsunami of mail-in ballots, they are terrified. There is no rational way to manage that much paper in a system that is not set up for it. We should not expect accurate counts. We should not expect secure processes. We should not expect a timely decision on who's won. And in fact, that's all part of this process, right? Because the next and maybe last stage is moving to, again, litigation, staged litigation. They are anticipating that they will be suing all over the country. It's hard to imagine the presidential race not winding up back in the Supreme Court, given the current situation. Now, I have eternal hope that we're going to get some supernatural breaks along the way, and I believe that if we continue to fight, that's what we're called to do. We have to fight every step of the way. But if we don't, if we just let this happen, forget about it. They are counting on this presidency ending up in the Supreme Court, and then past that, it's the next stage is the federalization of elections. What is so wrong with mail-in ballots? Again, I'm getting back to this poll that was so disturbing. This 2 out of 3 Americans think that mail-in ballots would be more convenient, and therefore we should just move in that direction. What could be the harm? It's very important to consider the full context of what it means to cast your ballot into a system that has so few fraud provisions. The few that do exist are intentionally being peeled off of the process. Consider that if you make a mistake on your ballot, there's no assistance there. Ballots can sometimes be very complicated. If you don't do this correctly, your ballot can potentially be discarded, and you'll have no recourse. The vote harvesting is clearly another big issue that I've already laid out. But for this group, I think this is appropriate. Total reliance on the United States Postal Service. The leader of the Postal Workers Union, Mark Diamondstein, is a well-known socialist, some would say communist, who has backed Bernie in the both cycles very, very actively, has protested all over the world on behalf of the Labor Party. Now that's who we're going to put into a key position in managing the ballots inside of a system, the United States Postal Service, that is on the verge of bankruptcy. There is no rational explanation for why you would expect to see this kind of a push to mail-in if it weren't that it's all part of the plan to implode it, manipulate it, and take it over. That's a scary thought, but I believe that that's where we're headed. I believe the writing's on the wall, unless we do something about it. So what can you do? There are fortunately many things. Bev's already hit on the get out the vote. This year it will be more important than ever to vote. And I would argue that voting this year isn't going to be enough. We have to do more. We have to be engaged. And so the ways that you can be engaged, many people don't know that we have a chronic shortage of volunteers. Now, yes, there is going to be a shift because of all the paper that's going to be generated through the mail-ins. But even there, citizens have opportunities to serve on these mail-in ballot review boards and be a part of the process that, if your state, at least, some states are still allowing signature comparisons. Some states are not, and really limiting it to postmark reviews and so forth. But at least there's something that we can do. We have to get in the game in every possible way that we can. So, looking at mail-in ballot review boards, certainly looking at being a poll worker or a poll watcher, looking at being part of the central count. True the Vote has lots of trainings that are posted online where you can go sign up, take our trainings. Lots of state resources where we'll tell you what the poll worker requirements are in your state, how to get connected. But at the end of the day, the way that you have to find yourself connecting is through the party or candidate of your choice, or possibly your county. We can help you and would love to help you get as close to that process as you can. But at the end of the day, you've got to make that next step to insert yourself into the process. We can't, unfortunately, we can't place people in the polls. I wish we could, but we can't. We can train you up, we can equip you, but you're going to have to make that next step, and we'll help you every possible inch of the way. We need as many hands on deck as we can find. Yours, your friends, your families. We need people in the polls, eyes on, in the mail-in ballot review counts, eyes on. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, so I'll kind of land the plane here. Our elections depend on us. We know that intuitively, we get it. And we've all heard for years, oh, this is the most important election of our lifetime. I think we all know in our gut, this really is. This is the end game. And we have got to be full court press from now until whenever this thing ends. And it's not going to be in November, I don't believe. We'll see, I hope. But there are things that citizens can do. Anticipate serving beyond just your vote this year. Anticipate serving inside of these processes, because left to their own devices, the left is going to chew us up and spit us out, because they have taken control of the processes that we have taken for granted. So we've got to engage now, and there are pathways to do it. We'd love to help you. And I think we can pull it out. We just have to go all in. So with that, I'll just turn it over to any questions that anybody may have.
Wow, Catherine, that was incredible. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I didn't know that about the leader of the postal union. Doesn't surprise me, but I've long worried about mail-in ballots. I worry about people mailing donations to me. A very big donation never showed up. I tell people don't even write on the outside of the envelope Jim Simpson for Congress. Just write Jim Simpson, and then on the inside.
You hate to even have to say these kinds of things, but they're true. And I can tell you that with True the Vote, there was a period of time, because a lot, in end of year, sometimes contributions can pick up. We did not get a single piece of mail last year from November to January.
Wow.
Not a single piece of mail. And we had people calling us saying, well, we've sent in checks, and
wow.
What do you do? Because you don't know what should have been coming to you. You didn't get anything. We ended up having to change our address. This is very serious, and they're outplaying us in the courts right now. So, being on the field is going to be the next best thing we can do.
Yeah, and I can't stand that tactic of suing sympathetic bureaucracies who then just settle, give them an excuse to settle, so they all get what they want. It is so corrupt. It boggles the mind, and it's infuriating. Well, let's see. We got two questions here right now. Doreen wants to know what's going on, if you know anything about what's going on in Michigan.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to rack my brain with what's happening in Michigan. There are so many, and they are changing so quickly.
While she's looking, I might add, Jim, it's interesting that Governor Whitmer let the election happen, and then right after midnight decided she'd shut down the state back in March. Like pushed Biden over the edge and say, okay, that's it, shut down.
The best I can do right now is to tell you that there are, it looks like about 4 lawsuits pending on various aspects of the election process. I can't speak to what the governor has done, he knows, but you know, it's clearly it's going to be, you know, in the crosshairs.
Yeah. Okay, John says, vote in person was successful in Wisconsin. Why can't we push for more of that throughout the country? There didn't appear to be any negatives in Wisconsin. We should be able to legitimize actual voting based on those positive results.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Unfortunately, there are, you know, there are groups out there with very, very, very deep pockets that are putting hundreds of millions of dollars towards litigating this under the, again, under the you know, the fear-mongering tactic of COVID. And we've just gotten ourselves into quite a fix.
Yeah.
But if you have the opportunity to vote in person, that is the safest way to cast your vote, without question.
Yeah. And I think in Wisconsin, they won a state Supreme Court judge turned down the governor's, you know, there was a lawsuit about having it in person, and he turned down the governor's request to have it, you know, by mail. And so that was a significant victory in Wisconsin that allowed it to move forward. But every state has its own laws, and every state has its own leaders. And if they're a Democrat leader, you can be guaranteed that they're going to try to do everything they can to do mail-in vote and use every other kind of vote fraud tactics they possibly can. And so that's why it went forward in Wisconsin. And those are the kind of things that have to happen everywhere. Unfortunately, I was actually shocked that there was a Wisconsin Supreme Court that decided in our favor, because so many of the courts have become corrupt.
Well, a little interesting note about what happened in Wisconsin, even though we did get the victory, then the argument turned to when you can count a ballot and what a legitimate postmark was, because 10% of the mail-ins came in after Election Day. So back into negotiations they went, and all of those ballots ended up counting. So we need to eat our Wheaties, because they are going to play for every possible inch to exploit this process, exploit every possible weakness. So it's going to be an interesting next few months.
I'm kidding. May you have interesting times. The Chinese curse. What is happening in Ohio? Yeah. Susan asks, what is happening in Ohio so far with the ballots and our process?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look like Ohio has anything active right now, which is great. I mean, by way of lawsuit, which is a great thing.
Yeah. Dan,
but it doesn't mean that it will not change tomorrow. You know, it's things are changing so quickly that it's just jaw-dropping.
Yeah. Dan, do you know if...
No, I would say, Bev, any idea?
Well, we were supposed to vote in June in the polls. They extended it to June. And then it became known to the Secretary of State and the governor and the lady who runs the health department, Dr. Atkins, seems to have sole authority to open and close anything in the total state. It's kind of really frightening here. But the point I'm making is that they figured out that if we voted on that date that they had originally selected in June, we would not have met the deadline for candidates to become for delegates to be chosen for the presidential candidates for both the Republican and Democrat parties. So then the election moved back into late April, and all of a sudden it became totally by mail. So if you voted early, which we did because we planned to be active on election day, on the primary election day, we had already voted. So actually nobody voted in person unless you voted at the Board of Elections. That was open until the date that Dr. Amy Acton closed it. So I kind of thought that I would send a text message to the Secretary of State and start dialoguing with him and start asking him directly, what is he thinking of doing? I mean, I'm going to just push him and push him and push him, because if we're going to gear up to get people to the polls and the plan is to not have the polls open, then we will be wasting a lot of time on the wrong thing. So we really got to be dancing on both the toes of both feet at the same time. But our Republican governor actually selected to run the Department of Health a committed Democrat. I filed with the Franklin County Board of Elections her voting record, and it took a couple of weeks to get it because it's not easy to get like it is with Cuyahoga County. You can just go on the Board of Elections and you go into the city you're interested in, put the person's name in, and you can see all their voting history. That wasn't happening with the Franklin County Board of Elections. So I requested this record, and then first I got told, well, we're not open because of COVID, blah, blah, blah. And then I pressed and pressed. They said, okay, we'll get it to you. And they finally did. But she is a tried and true Democrat.
Yeah.
And so we have a Republican governor who's being told what we need to do by a Democrat Minister of Health, the head of the Department of Health. I wanted to make one other point because Catherine said something important. Catherine made the point, engage with your county party. I am asking you to engage with the Trump campaign or any other candidate that you are supporting in your particular races, but in Cuyahoga County, not to engage with the Republican Party. So we have had issues. So our party in our county is not the place to give your time.
Yeah, it's the same thing true in here in Maryland. Okay, so
Yeah, and that's a good word. That's a good word. Unfortunately, that's more true, broadly than we'd like.
So Ken asks, how do you clear the voter rolls? Well, that's kind of a complicated process. I guess you can answer that, but the National Voter Registration Act requires this arduous process you go through of notifying people who haven't voted in a while, and you know that process better than I do. But as I say that, I will mention the fact, for those that don't know, Catherine knows this, the National Voter Registration Act was a law written by Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. And despite the claims that this thing was supposed to smooth election process, it actually opened it up to this massive cluster mess that we have. And that was their intention, because their intention is to overwhelm the system with problems. And first they did it with welfare, and their next target was the elections. And they worked on it for 10 years, wrote a book about that and justified it all. And now that's the system we have. And it's unconstitutional as far as I'm concerned. The NVRA should be repealed, and we go back to states' rights issues, let the states manage their own voting, but we should have stronger efforts everywhere to clean the voter rolls and strict voter ID.
Well, I absolutely concur. And I'll just say this, we live in the age of Amazon one-click, right? I mean, listening in the run-up to tonight's program and talking about, when you mentioned your former guests and the gentleman who was the whistleblower at Google. I mean, look at how deep technology can go if you're wanting to use it for such purposes. There is no reason that we could not verify identity, residency, and citizenship in real time. It's done in private industry every day, all day. The data is there. The solutions to these problems are there. The reason that we have messed up voter rolls, the reason that we have a upside down process is because those weaknesses can be exploited and manipulated for political gain. That's the only reason that you would not have a process that was more secure than where we're headed now. With respect to how you clean the voter rolls, the state is supposed to do this on a routine basis. They oftentimes don't. That's how you can get, and why we now have over 200 counties that have more than 100% of their eligible population registered to vote, with great political baggage clean the rolls. I mean, you're going to get sued, you're going to get slandered, but there's another way. As a citizen, you can look at your local county rolls, and if you identify a registration that you have reason to believe is inaccurate, you can turn that over to your county by way of what's called a citizen challenge. Now, every state calls it a little something different, but generally it's called a citizen challenge. And then the county has the obligation to follow up, determine whether or not that person's registration is correct. And if it's not, then they have the obligation to remove them from the rolls. Wow. We have some technology that helps us do this in a broad scale, but it's still very meticulous work because you cannot be wrong. If you turn these in, you can't be wrong. So in any event, that's two ways you can do it. You can wait on the state to do it, or you can try to do it yourself with citizen challenges. But it's the real answer is to bring our election process up to the 21st century using the technology that exists, but using it for good. Yeah, great. And with that said, I would add that those people who are interested in getting the process, Catherine made a pitch, but I'll make another pitch. You can become a True the Vote volunteer, and you can get all this incredible training so that you know what you're doing when you actually go to talk to the Board of Election and find out what you can do to be involved in the process, because she has really just a great organization. It's amazing the thing that she's done with that. Sam says, or Susan rather, says, I've been working the polls for over 20 years in Cuyahoga County and intending on working them in November to be ayes. Good for you, Susan. You have our applause. Good for you. Thank you.
Yep. Can we push for voter ID? Hesse asks, in light of the presence of illegals. Can we push?
We're the only industrialized country. Yeah.
Pardon?
We're the only industrialized country in the world that does not have a standardized form of voter ID. And while I appreciate the concern about doing something standardized, there are ways to achieve a process, and blockchain is a great example where you have a distributed ledger that is visible but yet secure, and you use the technology that's available to do this. So in short, yeah, we should have a voter ID. Other countries laugh at our process, and I've been witness to the laughter. This is crazy that we don't, but it's all for political gain. This is all
part of the enemy's strategy. Yep.
That's right.
Let's see. Anonymous attendee says, as of today, to my knowledge, Ohio can vote in person and by mail, also early voting. Okay. Lois Irene says, any suggestion on how to persuade Secretary of State of Ohio on how to change hours poll workers work? As it is now, it's from opening of polls, set up as 1 hour prior to polls opening and stay till polls close. More people would work the polls if they could work half a day. 2 shifts was a suggestion. It's a long day, which is why it's hard to get poll workers. We're told can't have this. So is there any way to persuade the Secretary of State of Ohio to change there?
I mean, you can, write, petition, ask,
Right.
Let your voice be heard on the matter. It is a very long day. And not many states allow for shift work, but it's a very long day. So you're taking one for the team. That's about all I can say.
Right. Let's see, Democrats, Brian says Democrats send email to Governor and Secretary of State on May 11th with recommended changes to general election. One item, allow community organizations, labor unions, and trusted helpers to deliver sealed ballots, right?
Yeah.
That's wonderful news.
I'd love to get a copy of that. If somebody can point me to where that link is, I'd love to take a look at that memo.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, the person heard that, forward it to Dan, RGA at, what is it, Dan? RGA at eaglefiremail.com? No, what is it? I forget.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Barbara, about the vaccine, I worry about them slipping it in without our knowledge. Someone told me that is against the law, but so is mandatory quarantine. We really can't speak to that tonight. That's a whole nother can of worms that we're going to have to deal with.
I do have a question on that, Jim, from somebody else that emailed it in.
Okay.
It's somewhat related, and so I know you don't want to necessarily go down that road, but if we're going to be people that want voter ID, then we have a number of people that are concerned about ID 2020. How does one feed into the other?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily feeds in. I mean, we all have driver licenses. What we need is a legitimate form of voter ID to identify ourselves as the person we say we are. There's all kinds of ID that we use now. We don't have to create a national ID voter database. We don't have to do that. All we need is a solid law that says you must present credible photo ID to prove that you are the person you say you are.
Okay.
Nothing special about that. What about this attack on electors, Hesse asks. Will they be required to vote? I'm not sure what she means by that. In person.
Oh, the faithless electors case that's being considered at the Supreme Court. That is very troubling, and we should all watch that closely, because that was a scheme to deny then candidate Trump the necessary number of electoral votes to win the Electoral College, and it was staged and planned, and then that case was taken up now by the Supreme Court, and they've taken it under advisement. So we should watch that closely.
And what did they do? What were the elector refused to vote for Trump or something?
Right. The elector refused to vote in accordance with the way that their state had voted. And there were a handful that did it in Colorado. I forget the other state. There were 3 states, and that's what it was about.
I remember that.
So they're referred to as faithless electors.
Well, Shirley just wanted to thank us all for an excellent webinar. She said she's going to forward it to others and request them to do the same. And she says, I appreciate, as I do, as Catherine does, that we need divine intervention. Yeah, I'll say so.
Yes.
We're fighting evil, and we can't do that alone of our own resources. It's too big for us. In God we trust on the subject line of my donation check. So she's going to be sending you a donation check, Catherine. Or maybe it's me. Make it to me. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe it's you. It's all to the good.
Doreen asks, how do people sign up with training with True the Vote?
You can go to our website and look at the resources section, and there's a section that says training. Just click right there, and you'll be able to see the programs that we have available. Yep, right there.
You can even get registered. You can even get registered to vote on your site. Wow.
Yeah, we actually just launched a new website, so we may be bearing witness to some bugs here.
Yeah.
All the way down. I think maybe the training piece is all the way down at the bottom, because it definitely says training somewhere. But in any event, you can get through it through resources as well.
Yeah, is join the movement where it says, is that the training, or is that just?
No, that's just to get signed up for like our newsletter and stuff. It should be all the way at the bottom, like in the footer.
Okay.
But it is definitely, it's definitely there
Yeah.
somewhere. I'm so sorry, but it's definitely there somewhere.
Okay.
The voter resource center, where it says resources at the bottom, the voter resource center. That's
Okay. Hesse asks, will the electors be required to vote in person? I don't know how electors vote. Do you know the answer to that, Catherine?
I don't know the absolute answer, but I do know that there's a lot of murmuring about doing it online and, doing it, remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
It's-
Rhonda asked if we can, she was,
breathtaking. All these changes are just breathtaking.
yeah, it's there, it's overwhelmed. It's Cloward Piven strategy, the whole thing.
That's exactly right.
Rhonda says, I was unable to join until now. Can we access this? We will be making a video of this, and it will be available through Dan. We'll be putting it out probably in my upcoming swamp report and separately as a separate email. So if you're on the email list, you'll get a link to the recorded video, so you'll be able to watch it and share it.
Usually by Thursday or Friday of this week.
Pardon?
So usually by Thursday or Friday of this week, what we'll do is we clean it up a little bit. We'll get Catherine's PowerPoint. We're making a separate video of Bev with her PowerPoint. So all of that will be included in the email recap. It takes a couple days for us to put it together because we do have jobs. We have to work, and then we come home in the evening and work on it and all that sort of thing. Usually by Thursday of the week, I'll get it out in an email recap.
Okay, so anonymous attendee asks that, we can't discuss vaccine due to time, but in everyone's opinion, not just Jim's, can Trump still be trusted? I love the guy, but not so sure of him anymore, especially since Jared and Ivanka are senior advisors. Somebody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, I will. It's a common refrain, Jim. I can tell you, it's 7 years of doing this.
Yeah.
I think the common denominator now of all of the different threats that we face
Yeah.
is that most people don't trust anybody in the government for one facet or another.
Yeah.
Let's look at just with our original vision of getting involved and trying to stop the Muslim Brotherhood. Now look at all these people going after Flynn,
Yeah.
going after Trump.
Yeah.
They are the same cabal of, I don't want to swear tonight, they're the same cabal of people that wouldn't do anything to stop the Brotherhood and let them do all the damage in our country.
Yep.
And Antifa.
Yep.
And Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
And Occupy Wall Street. And all of it.
Yep.
Adding to that chaos that you're talking about, Catherine.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Well, Trump is on the ropes, definitely, and he's been bashed and badgered so much. I'm amazed that he's been able to survive this long and still put a smile on his face. He's got to be tired and overwhelmed, especially now that he, I'm sure, is coming to recognize that the Democrats are actually literally trying to sabotage our recovery with all of the things that they're proposing. And he's in a really tough spot. And you're right, Jared and Ivanka are terrible senior strategists. They should be nowhere near there. I've never understood how he defends them and keeps them so close to him because they're terrible. I mean, Jared, they were Democrats up until he was elected, and they still play around with all the Democrats and buy into all their mindless agendas and dangerous agendas. So, yeah, he's in a tough spot. We're in a tough spot. But I'll say the other side of it. What other options do we have? You don't go to war with the army you wish you had. You go to war with the army you've got. And he's the army we've got. And he has been better than any other president in memory in trying to defend our rights and trying to restore our nation. And he's the best thing we got. So I'd say we got to have faith. We got to have hope. We got to support him. And when we see things going wrong, start screaming about it, because I guarantee you, he heard all of our protests about the shutdown, and he is sympathetic to our need to open up. He's just been confronted by so many others who have so many evil agendas, and it's really hard to figure out who's who and what's what, and what the best way to go is. He's really over a barrel with this one. But I say we support him to the extent that we can. We let him know to the extent we can when he's screwing up, because he does listen, unlike any other president in history. He actually listens. And so we're hearing a lot of scary stuff about vaccines and everything right now, but let's just wait and see what actually happens, okay? And in the meantime, let's do everything we can to support the man and let him know how we feel about everything. Same guy. Although I'm a staunch conservative, somehow I got on a Democratic mailing list. Every single day I get approximately 4 emails a day, not only requesting donations, but pushing vote by mail and signing online petitions. Yeah, I do too. I don't know how the heck they got a hold of my email, but you know how they do that, Catherine?
I mean, they have access to all the data. I mean,
Yeah,
you
well,
know, every Silicon Valley operative is in league with them, or most. So it's not hard to come by.
oh, that's it.
But
Yeah. Okay. Ted asks, what is the best way to contact the president and be heard? Well, I would say, do you have some ideas on that, Catherine?
no better than, you know, no better than what you might suggest. I mean, he's very inclined to social media.
Yeah. He
You
reads
know,
tweets. He reads
yeah.
tweets. He notices tweets.
He's running the analytics on the tweets. I mean, he's looking, you know, he's looking intentionally to try to find where there are patterns for things. So that I would say would be a good avenue.
Well, also, you know, if you have a representative who's on the Freedom Caucus and you can communicate with them, the former head of the Freedom Caucus is now his chief of staff, and
That's right.
and he advises him. I mean, we are just so relieved that Mark Meadows is now his chief of staff, because for once he's finally going to get really good information. He's going to have the bad people in his administration identified to him, and the good people that are in or want to get in identified to him. So there'll be a lot of changes because of that. And if you can reach any of the Freedom Caucus members, you should talk to them. Do something on social media. There's a White House comment line you can call, and you can also get involved in some of these active protests that are going on, because you may not think your individual voice means much, but when there's 500 people standing on the steps of the Michigan Capitol shouting and defying every order that the Michigan governor puts out, that's something that gains a lot of attention, and Trump notices.
Hey, Jim, I got a question here, and then Bev's got a question or a comment, so let me do mine first.
Let's wrap it up after that.
Sure. I have somebody emailed, said he's set up as a poll judge in Collier County of Chicago. Could I provide more assistance doing something else?
Good question, Catherine.
No, I mean, a poll judge is a very powerful and necessary position. So I would applaud you. I do applaud you for taking that initiative. I would just say stay flexible, because if you don't have in-place polling, jump right into mail-in ballot review or central count canvassing. But being a poll judge is great, and thank you for doing that.
It's also very tough in a Democrat district, because they'll do all kinds of things like you discovered in 2010, and we reported on in the article I wrote about that, which you can all find at Accuracy and Media. The title of the piece is "The Left's National Vote Fraud Strategy Exposed," and it's on Accuracy and Media, and I have a very long section on True the Vote and the things that they confronted in 2010, which are just unbelievable to read. One last comment. Ruth Ann says, for your information, the White House comment line volunteers told me multiple times that Trump reads every one. And I'm not sure if he means every text, I mean every tweet, or every letter. I doubt if he reads every letter. There was when I was working there, the letters that came in to President Bush were maintained in these huge 4x4x4 dollies lining one hallway in the building, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of letters, which they had a bunch of people coming to read. So, but okay, so Ruth Ann commented again, when you call the comment line at the White House, he reads these comments. Okay, that's great. So there you go. So that's one thing you can definitely do. Thank you, Ruth Ann. All right, well, listen, it's 9:09, no souls saved after 9 o'clock. So I think we're going to terminate this program for this evening. I want to say, Catherine, it's always wonderful to have you. Always, you just you got such a great way of explaining things, and you're such an asset. I mean, folks, she created this whole program out of whole cloth, with a couple of other people helping her out on maybe some of the technology, and it's all just created from whole cloth, and it's amazing. And so she's busy, and they are fighting, and we all need to be fully engaged in the battle. And so I thank you all for coming, and I thank you, Catherine, for a wonderful presentation and for your constant efforts on our behalf that unfortunately don't get highlighted too often. I want to say good night to everybody. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful evening.